Hello. Today we're going to take a look at history and historians. So to start with, what do you think are 5 significant events that have happened in your life? Take a moment to write those down in your notes and push pause. When you have these written into your notes, push play again. Now that you've taken a look at this and you're looking at your list, if I were to do this, this is how I would make my list of significant events that have happened in my life. Winning section finals in football twice. Throwing a no-hitter to beat the #1 team in state. Graduating from high school. Graduating from St. Cloud State University. Moving to Florida to teach. Moving to Baltimore to teach. Being nominated Baltimore County Outstanding Teacher of the Year. And receiving a master's degree. Now, to look further in these significant events in your life, I want you to think about a couple of questions. 1. How do you determine which events to include in your list? Surely there are more than 5 things that have happened in your entire life. But how did you determine which ones that you were going to put on your list? This is the same question that historians have to question. When they look at it, we don't look at history as a day-by-day recording of what took place in America. Instead, someone has to take a look at it and decide what is important to put in this book. And again, one historian may think one event is significant, and another one may not think it's significant. Another question that historians must ask is, was it easy or difficult to choose only 5 events to include on your list? These two questions go hand in hand. Because how much do you want to put down? And I asked you to limit yours to just 5 today. Because I know when I looked at my life, when I'm trying to pick out significant events, there were a lot more events that happened in my life, but these were the ones that I thought were the most significant. And the last question, how did you list the items on your list? Did you list them by importance? Or did you list them chronologically and how they happened in your life? The list that I shared with you earlier, I listed my events chronologically. Now, let's take a look at the word history. Before we even get into the definition, let's break down the word. What words can you make out of this? So if you look at this word here, you're really seeing 2 different words. His story. But the question is, does anyone have a problem with this? Female sitting in the class right now, you should have a problem with this. Because when you break it down, simply put, history is nothing more than a story. It is an individual story about something that happened. Traditionally, it was men who told the story. And this is something that we're going to further explore through American history about why women didn't have as many rights and weren't looked upon and studied as much in the past. But men and women both have a story to tell. So in this class this year, we're not going to look at history, we're going to look at his or her story. But what exactly is history or her story? It's a study of the past through the discovery, collection, organization of information about past events. So when we take a look at this, what historians are really doing, what history is you come across some artifacts. You come across a letter that was written. You come across a picture. So you're collecting this information. You're discovering all this new information. You're collecting it, and then you're organizing it to find out what exactly happened. The story was never told before, and we don't always want to take it from one person. When you look at Columbus coming to America, do we tell the story of Columbus discovering North America just from his accounts? What about the other people that were on the ship with Christopher Columbus? What about the Native Americans? You've got to look at all of these items so that you can determine what actually took place. Now, as we're studying history, her story this year, I want you to think about this quote on the right. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. What does that really mean? We have to look back at the past. We have to study the past. We have to understand the past. The past will tell us who we are as a nation, who we are as individuals. Why do we have laws the way that they are? Because if we don't look at the past, there are mistakes that were made in the past. Do we want to repeat those mistakes and continue to repeat those mistakes? Study the past. It'll help lead us towards the future. Think about the laws that you have now. Why do we have laws? Why do we have our government that operates the way that it does? You can go back and look at the past, and the past will tell you the answer to this question. When our framers were putting together our government over 200 years ago, they didn't just decide one day that, oh, this is what we're going to do. They actually studied other governments in the world. Some of them successful. Some of them were not successful. So by learning from the past, looking at the forms of government that had failed and did not work, we framed our own government. And that is why to this day, we have the longest standing government in the world. When you determine what is important about the past and record it, you are the historian. So when you look at an event that we're going to study, and you write about it, you've now become the his or her historian. When you select the events from your own life, you acted as a his or her historian. The events that make up your personal story, your his or her story. Now, when we look at history this year, her story this year, we are really looking at it in parts. What are the components that make up his or her story? First of all, with the events that we study, we have to know who was involved and what were the interactions. Was the president involved? What did the president do? Looking at the second component, the what. What exactly was it? Did we go to war? Where did it take place? Did it take place in Europe? Did it take place in North America? Did it take place in Boston? Did it take place in Baltimore? When did it take place? When we look at this question, when we look at this component of history, we are looking at this in the sense of when it took place in a sequence. We are not going to memorize dates. I'm not going to ask you the date that the Revolutionary War started, or the day that the Battle of Trenton took place. What's important is to understand the sequence events. Looking at the events, knowing that the French and Indian War happened before the Revolutionary War. Knowing that the British imposed taxes on the colonists, and those led to the Revolutionary War. That's what we're going to look at when we look at time periods and the when. And then how you organizing and studying history. And in this class this year, we're going to look at his or her story chronologically. As we examine American his or her story this year, we will be able to categorize events and concepts learned into themes. Everything that we study can be placed into one of these 6 categories. It's important to look at these and be able to break them down this way, because when you look at an event isn't just shaped around one idea. When you look at the Civil War, geography had an impact. How the government reacted. The economic impact of the Civil War. The social impacts. When you look at how did it impact the everyday lives of Americans? What were the multicultural, multiracial issues involved